Thank you very much, Leslie. Right, members, I'm just going to ask Miss Young to do a roll call, and then we will get on with application 6B. Miss Young, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Abbott.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Foss.
Present.
Hodgson.
Present.
Holway.
Present.
Councillor Kemp.
Present.
Councillor Long.
Present.
Councillor Pannell.
Present.
Councillor Pringle.
Present.
Rowe.
Present.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, I haven't got my mic on. Yes, present.
Thank you. Yes, all present and correct, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Right, in which case we will move on to agenda item 6B, which is application 3841/20/OPA. Over to Mr. Kitchen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So now we have a second application in Dartington, known as the Sawmill site, which is land to the north of the A358. It is another allocation within the joint local plan. So under TTV 24/7, this site here, the brown, being the Sawmill site, in slightly much in a bit more detail. So quite a large allocation site, which in terms of it stretches right to the sort of Week Lane and stretches further north than the actual red line application of the application, which is on a smaller area. And I do apologise that in the terms of our latest version of this scale plan does not include the development which already exists here. So I'm going to put this plan up to show members in terms of context. This is sort of Sawmills East, also known as Origins, where I think it's 67 dwellings have already been built in the last few years. So our application site here, being in red, say part of an allocation. That allocation actually goes further to the north and further to the west, and that allocation is for housing of estimated provision of about 40 homes, and the policy requirements being having footpath and cycle access to the main road, connecting towards the village centre and the national cycle network. It requires the retention and future management of the hedgerow along the western boundary and of the tree belt on the northern part of the site. It requires additional strategic landscaping to the western site boundary to soften the edges of the development onto the undeveloped countryside. And it also requires provision of locally distinctive frontages onto the movement routes, especially the main 385. Very similar in terms of the last application, we have an outline application with all matters reserved other than access. It has been submitted alongside the Broome Park application, which we've also been considering. So it's been sort of considered in conjunction with some cumulative effects in terms of how the reports have been submitted and how I've considered it as an application. As I say, here's the site here. So we've got the 385 to the south of the site, and we've got the Origins estate to the east, and this is showing the Origins estate here and application site here. And just in a bit more detail, here's our application site. That allocation went right out to the edge of the road here, and also included this area of woodland to the north as well. They're both this area of woodland and all this area of tree planting are all outside of the application site, and the red line runs at about 10 metres inside the field boundary there. So if I show you on this this plan, here's the red line, and as with that sort of previous the Broome Park application, we have a buffer around the edge of 10 metres wide in this case, around the northern and western edges of the field. I'll show you the same plan again in terms of land, which is also in the control or ownership of the Dartington Hall estate. This is our application here, the red line here, but you can see the blue land, which is also in their control. And then showing you a slide in terms of the context of how the topography of the site works. So we have the higher land up here, the contours are shown where you can see them closer together. It means we're at the sort of steeper part. It keeps going up beyond the site boundary into the woodland here to the highest point, perhaps here. And then it slopes down towards the 358, where it then slopes both sort of east and west. So we have a sort of a little plateau in about this point here, at about the point of the proposed access into the site. Some photographs so showing you. So this is from the southeast corner, looking up towards that higher land I was mentioning, with the origins say to the right. Week Lane is down to the left here. That's set quite lower at this point of the field. It's much lower than the boundary there. And then some photographs from within the site to give it some context. This is from the sort of the top, the northeast corner, looking down. So Origins Estate to the left. Got also sort of Webber's Yard, Cavanagh Homes on the other side of the road. So we've got the 358 running along here. Leonard Cross here, so that's looking down, and then moving across to the other corner. So the northwest corner, looking down. So Origins off to the left. Week Lane is down below. It drops off quite significantly here, down to the lane. And you've got Cavanagh there. Again, we've got about a 10-metre buffer around about this sort of line from the edge of the field to the application site. And then one from the southwest corner. So this was the big pine trees behind me to my back. So looking across the site, woodland up to the top, and Origins Estate here. Again, as an outline application, so we have some indicative plans of showing how that might work, but we are here to determine the access to this application, and is proposed to have an access in or two separate accesses to this site, one off the 358 and one off the Origins development here, a secondary access off Origins. So here's an indicative plan showing potential layout. It's got some quite straight roads, which has raised a number of concerns both from internal consultees and members of the public in terms of it being quite straight lines here. But as I say, it is an outline application. We're not here to determine that layout at this stage. We are here to think about whether 40 dwellings can fit within this red line area, and whether it is appropriate to have a main point of access at this point and a secondary access here. Green infrastructure plan showing sort of less green infrastructure within the site than the previous one, but also we do have this area of land around the outside edge, and a ecological constraints and opportunities plan. So as with the previous application, we are within within sort of 4 kilometres off the SAC and the Greater Horseshoe Bats. So a requirement to have 10-metre wide dark corridors around the edges of the development, the sort of northern and western edges, where lighting could be controlled to be less than 0.5 lux light spill. And then within the main site, things like hedgehog passes into garden fences, bat-bird boxes provided in new buildings. We've got some active subsidiary badger sets just on the edge here. So just note that this red line is not the same red line as the application site. The actual application site red line is the edge of the buffer. So that's just showing the ecological constraints, and then showing the Greater Horseshoe Bat sort of constraints plan, where it's proposed to have a dark corridor, a minimum of 10 metres wide along here, with Devon hedge banks along the edge as well. So new hedgerows, hedge banks being put in there, maybe needing some cut throughs at points, but certainly new hedgerow to be put in to mitigate loss of any hedgerow along the frontage. Excuse me, to get the access into the site. Again, following a number of consultation responses, I've looked at securing a parameter plan to set the framework for how 40 dwellings could fit within this site, and that would be within this orange area. So this parameter plan deals with things like building heights. It talks about nothing more than 2 stories, using this, cutting into the slopes where possible. Additional sort of strategic landscaping along that western boundary as required by the policy, while also showing the main access off 358 and a secondary access off Limberland Avenue. Access plans. So we are here to determine access at this stage, with the main access being here. So simple T-junction arrangement with new access into the site, and that would access the majority of the dwellings. As part of these plans, it also shows some on-site highways works, which I'm just going to zoom in on now. So the road widened slightly to allow for a central refuge to be installed with illuminated or reflective bollard there, and tactile paving in terms of providing that a crossing point. So it's an informal crossing point, but with central refuge with 2 metres wide. So that's wide enough to take pushchair or bike and be able to cross one carriageway at a time. It also proposes to relocate the bus stop. So the current bus stop's at Lownard Cross, where there is no pavement or no area to stand off the road for the bus. So a replacement bus stop with bus shelter in this location here, and then a shared pedestrian footway, shared pedestrian cycleway from the site to then enter onto the road network. So cycles would then enter onto the road network here, whereas pedestrians would stay on the path, or could cross at this point here if they were wanting to be on the other side at Webber's Yard. The secondary access point is off Limberland Avenue, and this would be very much restricted to a maximum of 5 dwellings. So it would only provide vehicle access for up to 5 dwellings. I'm just going to zoom in on that, off Limberland Avenue, with no connection between this new road coming in and the new road coming off the A358, other than pedestrian and cycle link. So if you were walking or cycling, you'd be able to walk from one access to the other, but if you're in a vehicle, you would not be able to go through the site. So this would only provide access for a maximum of up to 5 dwellings, thus limiting the amount of traffic coming through Limberland Avenue. In terms of the photographs coming into the site, so this is arriving at Lonard Cross. The application on the site is into the left here. So this is where the bus stop. There's a bus stop here with no obviously pavement or anything like that. So I think that is an improvement in terms of relocating it to a location where it can be accessed more conveniently. Again, going down into the site, this is about the point of the access in. So we have the Origins estate there. We have the sort of original hedgerow at this point, some of which would need to be removed, and that's contained within my report. And then beyond that, we have a more recent hedgerow, which was put in as part of the road widening and road works for the roundabout here. So looking back up the site or up the road, we have the site on the right hand side there, new access point coming in here, the existing field access gate being closed off as part of the proposal, and having a central sort of island refuge for people to cross from the site onto the other side and pavement there. And then just looking at that, where that access point is here, so that's where that newer hedge has been put in, and the access point going in about here. So as I said, the bus stop gets relocated, off-site highway works off the central island here, main vehicle access here, and then a secondary vehicle access, which was limited to a number of five of the 40 dwellings, or up to 5 of the up to 40 dwellings off Limberland Avenue. That secondary access would be through here. So this is through Limberland Avenue. That's the field gate at the moment it would go through. We do have the children's play area as part of the Origins estate here, and one of the reasons why I feel that actually having a restricted access here is, and with the main access off the 358, is the most appropriate way to get into this site. As part of the safety audit which has been submitted, that does include some works to provide a rail along the edge here, so that we wouldn't have the conflict between people using that play equipment and the limited number of vehicle movements going into the site from that point there. This is just looking from that secondary access back out. So this is the viewpoint to the left in terms of visibility and what the context of dwellings around, and looking down the street, where is walking access down to the playing fields and community facilities such as the play area and the shops and also some of the employment areas as part of Webber's yard. One of the things which came up originally as this application was submitted is how off-site or how surface water drainage would be dealt with, and submitted alongside this application was a full application for a off-site attenuation pond, so on the other side of the road of the A358. So A358 runs along here, so it's a bit faint on this drawing, but it was proposed to have a off-site water attenuation feature here, which in itself raised a number of concerns and objections, not part of the allocation at all, but has raised a number of issues to the point where I needed to be satisfied that surface water could be dealt with on site, but in a way which may be not reliant on actually having any kind of off-site attenuation feature, on the basis that if, when this application is determined, it was refused or it had adverse impacts in terms of wildlife, etc., or landscape impact, if that was refused, I need to be satisfied that it is still possible to deal with surface water on site before it being released into the wider drainage network. So in effect, to not be reliant on this as the only solution. So further information has been submitted and consulted on with the local lead flood authority and all consultees, which would involve dealing with surface water through a mixture of infiltration, because on the higher slopes of the site, it appears that infiltration would or could be possible in these sort of green areas. And then we have areas where a bit more work needs to be done to work out in this orange area whether it could be infiltration could work there. And then the red areas are probably areas where it's unlikely to work as a sole reason for dealing with, or sole solution to dealing with surface water. So at that point, it would need some sort of storage on site. And what this plan shows indicatively is how surface water could be dealt with on site through a mixture of infiltration and storage tanks to attenuate before then being released by pipe into the Wren Brook down to the southwest. So the drainage strategy at the moment proposes two alternatives. It could either be through a off-site surface water attenuation facility, which would require full planning permission and a separate application, which is under consideration but on hold because there are some outstanding issues with it. So that is one option. The other option being dealing with water on site in terms of attenuating and holding before being released into the Wren Brook at a greenfield runoff rate plus climate change. So in effect, what's been proposed is an either or. So if that application for the attenuation pond were refused, the site could still look after itself in terms of dealing with its surface water drainage. And at that point, I feel comfortable in terms of bringing it to members with a recommendation that that the site could come forward in such a way where it can accommodate up to 40 dwellings and deal with the surface water as part of the reserved matters application. So just showing you the site again there. So that's the application site, secondary access off this point and primary access here. The proposal for 40 dwellings, of which 30% would be affordable at the same proportions as previously on the Broome Park. So that would be 12 units, of which 8 would be social rented, the other 4 being intermediate type housing. Fixing the housing mix of the open market units at this stage at the same as the Broome Park mix. So a good mix of one, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses in terms of open market, which looks at the local needs for the area, and fixing things like the green infrastructure at this stage on the boundary of the site. So the recommendation is to delegate an approval at this stage to the head of DM Development Management in conjunction with the chairman for conditional outline planning permission subject to 106. The 106 being very similar or 106 requirements being very similar to what we've discussed on the Broome Park application. So including affordable housing, so 30%, 12 units at with 2/3 being social rented, 1/3 being intermediate housing, achieving the policy requirements of open space and accessible natural green space within the site and making sure that is integrated within the site, so not just all around the edge. So a mixture of around the edge and integrating into the site. Equipped play, this one has some options here in terms of it could either provide on site or it could provide financial contributions to be used off site. Because we're on a much smaller site of 40 units, if we were to get equipped play on site, that would consist of something like a local area for play, a lap with probably about 3 pieces of equipment on it. An alternative would be to secure financial contribution for spending off-site to maybe improve, enhance facilities down at Meadowbank. Again, proportion of contribution towards sports facilities, provision of contribution towards allotments, because this site isn't going to be big enough, and the requirement from this site is only to provide a half an allotment. So we can secure a contribution towards, and that could be provided if they come through in if developments come through in certain order, could could include provision of allotments on the Broome Park site or financial contribution if that's not possible at all. Also securing the travel plan, the same as Broome Park. So securing the submission of the travel plan. Primary healthcare in terms of increasing capacity at local doctor surgeries, again at the same proportions as Broome Park. And then finally securing all the ecological landscape ecological management plan and construction environmental management plan, woodland management plan, and the biodiversity net gain as part of a 106 in exactly the same manner as Broome Park, to ensure that we can mitigate any impacts on wildlife and on the greater horseshoe bats as set out in the housing regulations assessment appended to the report. Again, I have the same update to give you on this one regarding the NHS or the Torbay South Devon NHS Foundation Trust, who were seeking a contribution of £15,346 towards the gap funding in between people residing on site and the way the NHS are funded annually, their annually agreed contract. As with Broome Park, I don't believe that we have the policy backing for this. And again, it's an allocated site, so it is known development coming forward. Having 40 dwellings here should not come as a surprise to anyone planning for healthcare, because it does form part of the local plan strategy of delivering houses. So my recommendation, the same as Broome Park, is to not include that as part of the recommendation, but to include the provision of monies towards increasing capacity at the local doctors' surgeries at Catherine House and Leeds side. So we can secure that part, but not the gap funding. So the recommendation is to grant permission subject to that 106, say similar issues to the Broome Park application, but where the main difference on this one is in terms of surface water, whereas the Broome Park application just dealt with it all on site. This application, when it originally came in, was proposing to deal with it off-site, but given that can't be guaranteed, that could be refused planning permissions, for instance. I needed to be satisfied that there was an alternative scheme which would allow for surface water to be dealt with on-site. We now have that, and on that basis, I'm happy to recommend approval, subject to conditions, including a similar condition which would require the submission of the drainage strategy to come forward as part of the reserved matters. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kitching. I've a question from Councillor Pannell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. You're talking about dealing with the drainage on the upper part of the site by infiltration. Would that be by soakaways or natural infiltration or any other means, please? And secondly, I presume all this would come back to us again when the reserve matters come back to committee.
Yes, so the Origins site managed to deal with all its surface water, I believe, by just dealing with it by infiltration through soakaways. This site may be slightly different in that there are areas where that is not possible, but there are certainly areas where it is possible on that higher land. So I believe it would be possible to come forward with a layout which involved using a mixture of soakaways for sort of surface water from roofs and etc. within that green area, potentially within that orange area as well, but probably not in the red area. So where we need to work to the highest part of the Suds train. So where it can be achieved, we need to do that. Where it can't be achieved through soakaways, then we'll look at attenuation. And yes, that would all need to come forward as part of a reserve matters application, designed at the same point as the layouts, etc. So yeah, a mixture of infiltration as much as possible, but where infiltration isn't going to work, we need to look at a way of storing water either on the surface or underground before releasing it at an appropriate rate into the Wren Brook.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, a couple of questions. Thank you. I'm very concerned about the removal of the Devon Bank. Obviously, we've got a rural road that's becoming an urban road, and it's just stretching it further back. So I'm not hearing that there's actually going to be proper replacement of that. What was replaced further along on the origins, which was Sawmillsfield East, and also on the other side of the road, is wholly inadequate. I mean, they've just been kind of this sort of like token sort of fenced hedges as opposed to a proper Devon Bank, which is what we're looking at there. The second one I wanted to ask was about can you just point out again where the location of the new bus stop is? Because I think the slides weren't catching up with what you were saying. So that's why I put about the cursor wasn't moving. I couldn't see where you were talking about. And third point is this plan that you've just been talking about with the alternative drainage options, is that actually available on the website? Because a couple of people have just texted me to say, where is it on the website, these new alternative proposals? I don't think that plan was the plan that was put out as part of the re-advertisement, as far as I understood it.
Yeah, I can deal with the final part of the question. Yes, it was, because I took it off the website yesterday to put it into the presentation. So it forms part of the drainage feasibility. I believe it's in the feasibility report, which is on the website, which formed part of the reconsultation. So yes, it's definitely there because that's where that picture has come from, direct from the website. Yeah, in terms of the Devon hedge bank, I know exactly what you mean about you. I think in terms of you're saying it's not very successful. I presume on this side here, I think we've got a situation with a development which sort of tries to face the road and have a replacement hedge bank, and I don't think it quite does either that successfully. So my sort of personal professional opinion there. I think this site, obviously there is a policy requirement that we have a suitable development facing onto the road here. The putting in of the access will require some removal of that hedge bank, yes. Some of it being sort of the older stuff and some being the new. As part of that reserve matters, landscaping and design of appearance and layout of houses would be considered, and I think it would be important to make sure we get something which properly addresses the road and maybe works better than perhaps what we've got on the other side. So I believe it is possible to come up with, there'll be a number of solutions there, but it could involve replacement hedge bank onto the road, but to say that is a matter which is reserved for subsequent approval, but it will still need to meet those plan requirements. And then your other point was regarding the bus stop, and I'm sorry, I appreciate my mouse pointer sometimes is slower than, or what it comes across to you is slower than where I have it on my screen. So if you can see the yellow box there on the plan, so that is the proposed location of the new bus stop. So we have the roundabout off to the right here. So new bus stop there.
Sorry, which box? Which yellow box?
Can you see the yellow box on that plan?
What, right in the middle of the picture?
Yes. Yeah. So
the
yellow box is writing saying this is what the road sign would look like.
I can only see the picture that you were showing earlier of the hedgerows.
So can you see the access plan at the moment?
No.
Is that what?
No.
Right.
I'm looking at slide 63.
Right, I'm on slide 66, and that's what it's showing as being presented at the moment. I'm going to stop presenting and then restart.
No, don't do that, Mr. Kitchen. No, I can see slide 66 on my thing. Maybe it's just a slight delay on Councillor Hodgson's.
It is. I can see it as well.
It's there now. Yeah, it's just come there now.
All right. Okay.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So yeah, I can see the yellow box now. Okay. Right.
Yeah. So that's the location of the bus stop there. In terms of where that is on the ground, on the aerial photographs. Bear with me. So hopefully you can see a slide now when we stood on the centre of the roundabout looking west. So that bus stop would be in about this location here where this telegraph pole is. So we'd have a new footway, cycleway from the new access point to this point. So the bus stop would be a new bus shelter there, and the yellow markings on the road in terms of the bus stop as shown on that highway plan I showed you a moment ago. So that's the relocated bus stop from the Lonard Cross point.
And will there be a zebra crossing for the people from High Tweedmill to get across the road?
No, so the highway plan here shows a so at this point we have a central refuge area in terms of the crossing point there to move from because we have footway all along the south side across here, so footway across and then bus stop here.
Okay. Is that going to be properly marked crossing, or is that just an island in the middle of the road?
So that's an island in the middle of the road, so tactile paving on each side, tactile in the middle, with the bollards in the centre. So it's one of those sort of triangular central refuges, but it's not a black and white line zebra crossing. It is the more informal crossing point, but with the central reservation, so you can do one carriageway at a time rather than waiting for it to be clear on both carriageways at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kemp.
Hello. I'm just wondering if the boundary of that site is going to be as close to the road as the properties opposite, and also, oh, it misses those trees. So the trees I've just seen in the photograph, they're to be retained, I take it, are they?
Yeah, they're outside of the
Right. Okay. So those big
area.
trees. So stay on that pit. Sorry, Bryn. Can you go back to where you just were, where you're standing in the middle of the road? So those properties there, are the properties on the other side of the road going to be as close to the side of the road as those?
That will all come up in reserved matters.
Okay.
Councillor Kemp.
Sorry.
Right. Are there any more questions for Mr. Kitchen? No, in which case we'll move on to the speakers. Now, I know that Councillor Morley needs to go. I don't know if she's still there. In which case I'd ask Councillor Morley to go first.
I'm here. If I can, thank you very much. Can I barge straight into my talk now?
Yes.
Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes,
Okay,
we can. Yes, you press on now.
Okay. I'm Annette Morley, a member of Dartington Parish Council. Its detailed objections to the sawmill's applications include comprehensive references to planning policies and law. This statement highlights some of their key reasons. Insufficient information was provided in the first application, and the extra reports in the re-advertisement were also inadequate. I personally note that the applicants have produced last-minute reports, yet with insufficient time for perusal and comment by all concerned parties. I personally believe that is wrong, and that the decision today should reflect that failure. We must wait for more detail, and we should have time to consider it. Summarising, objections are based on ignoring the cumulative effect of all local developments, insufficient protection for wildlife, including the Greater Horseshoe Bat, inadequate responses to Natural England's wide-ranging concerns, absence of on-site attenuation basin or equivalent water defence measures, access and Section 106 matters. In detail, cumulative developments. We have not one but 3 linked development applications here, and it is simply wrong to consider the wide-ranging effects of each one in isolation. Cumulatively, the damage is much increased to all wildlife habitats, including that of the greater horseshoe bat and the loss of flora and fauna. The cumulative effect is underlined in the Joint Local Plan and in the Wildlife and Countryside Act, yet nowhere is it addressed fully within the applicant's ecology reports from EAD. Protection of wildlife. The site lies within the sustenance zone of two major roosts of the greater horseshoe bat, which by law have protected flyways, roosts and foraging habitat. I will not detail the damage that would be caused to bats at sawmills because Councillor Toll's statement in Broome Park has explained it. The proximity of the sites means that the same concerns apply to sawmills. The sawmills development as it stands would also cause habitat loss for barn owls, slowworms, badgers, rare flora, 71 metres of species-rich Devon Bank will go. Species-rich lowland meadow will go. Overall biodiversity will diminish. None of these losses have been properly and fully recognised, nor properly and fully mitigated by the applicants, and they should be held to account. Natural England's letter of 17 December voiced serious concerns about the harm to bats, about biodiversity loss, and about green infrastructure. EAD's response accepted their concerns, yet it either diminished them or offered no solutions. Particularly, they refused to produce a woodland management plan at this critical stage. They refused to produce a construction and environmental management plan at this stage. Surface water and attenuation basin. Personally, I believe this sawmills application should be considered and only considered together with the application for its attenuation basin. If the basin were to be refused later, as many have voiced, the design of this outline application, and remember this is a full application for access, they ought to be changed. Attempting approval in advance on this full application for access and the outline might avoid those changes, and that, in my opinion, is actually morally challenging. Instead, alternatives to the attenuation basin should be sought now. If there is no alternative, the basin should be sited on sawmills, even if it forces a reduction in the number of houses. Access, particularly, why not confine access through the Origins Children's Play area to pedestrian and cyclists only, instead of driving the traffic of 5 houses through it as well? And section 106, remember community facilities for the elderly and linking cycle and walking routes with existing ones. I thank you for your attention. Is it acceptable? Is it acceptable if I leave now? I'm sorry, I can't stay for questions. Is that acceptable?
No, that's fine, Councillor Morley. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciated. Right, members, we'll move on to the second speaker. I'm afraid Councillor Morley has to leave, so we can't ask her any questions. So we'll move back to online. So, Mr. Day, if you're there, could we have your presentation, please? Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is John Day. I'm a professional ecologist and author of the Ecological Statement concerning Sawmills Attenuation Pond, submitted by Don't Bury Dartington Under Concrete. I'm resident in South Brent and have had strong links with Dartington since 1993. My children and grandchildren attended school in the parish and a daughter lives there. I know the area well. I was consulted about the current applications towards the end of March. With only a short opportunity to respond, effort was concentrated on the attenuation application due to its severe ecological impact. However, there are also substantive concerns about sawmills, relating to reliability of surveys and evaluations, plus the effectiveness of the proposed mitigation. As such, determination seems premature. It may be appropriate to delay pending further ecological investigations. The two principal areas of concern are flora and bats. The grassland assessment for the attenuation site was unsatisfactory. Therefore, little confidence can be placed in the evaluation of those same interests at Sawmills. Most of the development area is given the same evaluation as the attenuation field, which suggests that the interest at Sawmills could be high. Researchers indicate that Sawmills is considerably richer than suggested in the submission, which lists about 90 species. The total is likely more like 160, which is a high botanical diversity. As such, the mitigation offered is insufficient. Imperforate St. John's wort, a Devon rarity, is established here. It is a native population confined by precise habitat requirements. These are not replicated in mitigation. A positive outcome cannot be predicted. The site is worthy of further investigation in respect of its flora and as feeding grounds for greater horseshoe bat. I have a background in bat conservation. Almost 40 years ago, I was the founding chairman of the Worcestershire Bat Group. I am unconvinced by the submission's evaluation of bat interests, particularly in regard to the Greater Horseshoe and the South Hams SAC. Ecologists attempt to understand how a species utilises a landscape. Submitted documents offer no serious attempt to elucidate local bat ecology. Impacts are unknowable, so even best practice mitigation is unpredictable. My own studies indicate the Dartington landscape holds more significance for Greater Horseshoe bat than is recognised in the submitted documents. My principal concerns are the cumulative impact of a series of local developments, the loss of a significant area of feeding grounds close to known roosts, a reduction in the willingness of bats to navigate through a developed landscape, and an underestimate of the importance of nearby roosts. For instance, the potential presence of a local maternity roost has not been investigated. South Hams District Council has submitted an anonymous habitat regulations assessment. It may be inadequate in regard to cumulative impact and associated aspects. If so, the council could be in contravention of habitat regulations. It is my understanding that Don't Bury Dartington Under Concrete is seeking expert opinion on these matters and will also submit a Freedom of Information request concerning the HRA's origins. The need for further research seems essential to assure no detrimental impact. I respectfully request that determination is delayed pending further ecological investigations. And thank you for letting me speak to you today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Day. Members, any questions? Councillor Hodgson, was that you, or is that a historical hand up?
That's me. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Question.
Yeah.
Question to Mr. Day.
Mr. Day, thank you, and thank you for the work that you've carried out. It's been very informative. I know that there's been questions raised about, you know, what's happening here and what's going to be affected. I mean, it's maybe a bit of an unfair question to ask, but just could you give us a bit of an indication on how severe you think the cumulative effects might be if all three sites that you've looked at went through, on particularly on the bats, but also on generally on the species that you've identified as being important?
Well, I think it could severely disrupt the ability of greater horseshoe bats to survive in this landscape in the long term. It would be cutting off their ability to move through this landscape. One of my main concerns, and this is where I feel that the reports didn't go into enough detail, is that there's clearly roosts fairly close to these development sites. even the submitted documents seem to admit that much. We don't know where those roofs are. So we really don't know what impact we're going to have on the local population of greater horseshoe bats. Looking at all the documentation, including other developments in the area which have had ecological reports done, and going through all the bat records I can find for the area, it strikes me there are unidentified roof sites in the local vicinity. Give you another example. I am aware of mine adits within a kilometre of this site which have never been surveyed. So I think we need to proceed under the precautionary principle here of no damage. Unless we can prove no impact, then we shouldn't develop. And I don't think that that has been demonstrated in the submitted reports.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other members with any questions? No.
Yeah.
In which case, oh wait, there no. I think we're all okay. Right. So in which case,
could I, sorry to butt in, but could I just have one more point? And it's about the SUD scheme, the new one that's come forward. I hadn't seen the new plans that I saw today, and looking at them, and it's the first opportunity I've had to see them. Even the new ones are suggesting a pipeline that actually goes through the field where the attenuation pond was going to be. So it would still be causing ecological damage to that grassland.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Day. I mean, the good news about that is even if we approve it at this application, that will come back at reserve matters. So, we're certainly not giving the go ahead for any type of drainage or drainage scheme at this stage. That will go, as the developer said before, it'll go hand in glove with the drainage scheme, will go hand in glove with the layout of the properties, and then we will discuss that at committee if and when it comes back at reserved matters stage. Right. I would. I think what I'd like to do is just bring in Miss Jennings again, if she's there, just to talk about the as the ecology and biodiversity is on our minds with that presentation from Mr. Day, just to just to put her point of view to the position and how she sees the situation. Ms. Jennings, are you there?
Hi, yeah. Can you hear me?
There. Yes, we can.
It's very similar comments as before, really. I mean, we have considered greater horseshoe bats in detail with Natural England. Natural England are now happy with this application. We do have that in writing from them. So in terms of knowing where all the roosts are, we can never know where all greater horseshoe bat roosts are across the South Hams SAC landscape. That's going to be impossible unless somebody gives us millions and millions of pounds to do endless survey and talk to people. So, and in this situation, I think it's irrelevant. EAD have done survey. We know that bats are using these sites. And so for sawmills, again, we have followed best practice, worked with EAD, Natural England, and come up with the dark corridors. The critical thing is to maintain connectivity through this landscape. Also, I did write the habitat regulations assessment. So apologies if you think my name should have gone on that. There was we weren't trying to hide anything there or be anonymous. And I'm very happy to talk to anyone about that. But I do look at in combination effects and the fact that this, there will be more lighting in this area, more urban impacts, and we do discuss that. But again, this isn't in a maternity sustenance zone for greater horseshoe bats. It's not a significant area in terms of the greater horseshoe bat SAC population as a whole, and so we feel that the developer has met the HABS regs requirements.
Thank you. I think there's a question from Councillor Hodgson, Ms. Jennings.
Yeah, if I may, thank you, Sarah. Can I just ask, have Natural England been made aware of Mr. Day's report?
I don't know. That's a question to Bryn, but that relates to the botanical interest of the attenuation basin, which isn't being discussed today. And as I said previously, Natural England and I have already, based on the EAD survey, raised concerns around the attenuation basin site. So his information is useful, but we already had sufficient information from EAD to have already raised those concerns around loss of that habitat.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Jennings. Right, we will now move on to Speaker Mr Hutton, please.
Hello there, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your time again, and I will try not to take too much of it because the majority of matters of principle for this outline application are, of course, common with the Broome Park application, which I'm delighted you've just approved. Our proposed development at Sawmills benefits from precisely the same relationship with the joint local plan, and it is part of the same overall allocations. And in addition, your officer's report makes it clear that our proposals meet the same tests in complying with policy, and overall, therefore, the application remains in accordance with the JLP. Having said this, every site is unique, and we've certainly not applied a one-size-fits-all approach to the proposals. And the evidence base that we've prepared has been produced using the same rigour as for Broome Park and draws its own site-specific conclusions in terms of the correct appropriate mitigation measures, as Ms Jennings has just explained there. Sawmills is, of course, a significantly smaller site with a different character, bounded by existing contemporary development. And I'm, of course, delighted that all statutory consultees agree with the robustness of the evidence we've submitted and that conclude that development can go ahead in accordance with the plan. Those bookends are slightly different on this site, but most appropriate for it. And I would particularly like to draw attention to two of those technical aspects briefly. Firstly, the drainage, which has been discussed. Groundwater levels are reasonably high, which limit infiltration. And we thought that to overcome this, the most sustainable drainage option would be an off-site drainage basin, which requires a further planning application not before you today. We probably misjudged how people would weigh the sustainability of the drainage system against the ecology, and it may have been too early. So we have demonstrated that it is entirely possible to drain the site in accordance with DCC flood drainage team's requirements using on-site measures, and condition 18, as proposed by your officer, would ensure that those details are worked up in tandem with the design of the homes. And as I said earlier, it's critical that that sustainable drainage system is central to the design of the layout, using above ground suds as and where possible. So that is what we will do, and it's entirely possible. Secondly, our proposal for Sawmills includes two access points, as mentioned by the officer: the primary access point from the 385 and the secondary access from Limberland Avenue, restricted to a maximum of 5 homes. And the Cavanagh Homes development was always designed with this access point in mind, and providing a small access here for a small number of homes will be really beneficial in designing effective public spaces and green infrastructure, which link through the existing homes, provide safe cycle and pedestrian routes. Now, all of that is, of course, reserve matters detail. And if approved, the secondary access just provides greater opportunity to high quality placemaking at reserve matter stage. So our proposals have met the same exacting scrutiny from Natural England as you've just heard, and we agree with the officer's conclusion that the evidence demonstrates how the proposals comply with the joint local plan. So if approved today, we will engage immediately with the community and stakeholders as we begin to develop detailed designs for the homes and the outside spaces, which are really important to the occupants and also the near neighbours. So therefore, I again urge you to support the principle of this development today by voting to approve the application. It accords with the local plan, and we would look forward to working to deliver an excellent development for Dartington. So thank you for your time again, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. Any questions, members? Councillor Hodgson, I see you've got a hand up. Is that historical, or did you want to ask a question?
It's historical. Sorry, Chairman.
That's all right. No, I think, Mr. Hutton, there are no questions. Thank you very much, sir. Right, and we will now move to Councillor Hodgson as local ward member. Councillor Hodgson, like before, this is just you as local member, and then we'll move into the debate. after you've spoken. Okay, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. It's not just ward member, Chairman. It's very important that we represent the community, and the community are really upset about all these developments. And I think the point that Councillor Morley made, who's parish councillor, about the cumulative effects should be taken into consideration. These sites, and Sawmills Field East should be part of the JLP. It was lost because it was actually developed out after 2014, which was the beginning of the JLP period. And so there's the one opposite, which is Higher Tweed Mill. Again, that was since 2014. So there's a lot of development going on in Dartington, major development, and to just do this piecemeal, one site at a time, I think is unreasonable, and I think it's reflected in the objections, the considerable number of objections, and indeed the parish council's own number of meetings that they've had to discuss this. So it's the cumulative impacts which are on, obviously, the visual amenities. You're coming into the village now, but that's kind of, in some ways, you might say, the least of the problems. The historic heritage, to the top left, that picture that we're looking at the moment, if you look to the top left, in other words, just north of the site, you can see the historic hamlet of Week, which is down below, much lower. So it's below Broome Park, and it's also below Sawmills Field West. The impact on wildlife that we've heard an awful lot about, the impact on road safety, because there's going to be more cars coming out onto this road, which is where the children are trying to cross. And I have to say, I'm quite shocked that there's not even a consideration of putting a zebra crossing in to allow people to cross over safely just there. They'll have to walk much further round. And I think, it's not. And as we saw also, the way that these sites are built out, what we were looking at on one of the earlier photographs that was shown, which was Councillor Kemp remarked on it as well, which was the site on the facing, which has the very bad version of a Devon bank. Well, that Devon bank, that should never have even been taken out in the first place on that side. And that's why there's always concerns, and why the community, in fairness, and parish council too, everybody's very suspicious of what happens, because that particular site on the other side of the road, the Devon banks were lost on the north of the site and on the south on Forder Lane, which was a known back corridor, because the houses were put in the wrong place. So the banks just got destroyed, and then just what was put back was a very poor version of it. So there is real, I think, cause for concern. And I think this is, again, just too much in one place, collectively and individually. So just to comment particularly on this site, I think that, what's been put forward and has come through in all the representations, as I say, is that cumulative impact. But it is like the wildlife we've heard a lot about. And you heard the question I asked Mr. Day about what he thinks would be the overall impact, which is, I can't help but agree, because we only have to look at the national and global reports that are coming out all the time now about the impacts on our wildlife. I mean, as we know, we've lost 60% of our wildlife in the last 60 years. This is how it happens. One field at a time, one tree at a time. It's chip away, and we don't do mitigation, and we don't actually check our mitigation. And that's a point I raised recently, and I think that's something that we could at least owe to people and to the wildlife, to actually do that as we go through these sites and give more planning permissions out. The historic heritage is also going to be damaged by the loss of that rural bank, that Devon bank. It's taking it right back almost a week. And in terms of safety, that road rises, where we're looking at that slide now, the bottom of the green dots at the south corner there, that is actually quite high there. So vehicles are coming along there quite fast. I know it starts at a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit just before there. And I have to say, I would hope that the whole of the area of the centre of Dartington will become a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, as and when Devon County Council start to allow those permissions to come forward again. But in the meantime, it's extremely dangerous. And I think people just taking their life in their hands, especially lots of young people that are moving into some of these houses. I think we need to have a proper zebra crossing there, and it should be conditioned at this stage, because it's all about the access. I think we also should be conditioning that a replacement of that Devon bank as well, a proper replacement, which we allow at least a couple of metres for it to actually be properly built out, not just a kind of a thin fence. I think we need to take into consideration the air quality that's going on here. And I think we need to be looking at how we can do green travel plans for all of these sites, not just travel plans, but green travel plans. So the emphasis is about not using the car and making sure that we actually provide proper, we condition funding that can actually support the bus services coming in, not just give people 30 quid bus track vouchers to take their car down to the station and use it there. the Stark roundabout that's part of its opposite Sawmills Field at the moment, I think that needs to be considered. People were duped into that. I don't know if you've got a picture of that, but if you look at the aerial photograph of it closer, you'll see that there's a double ring, and everybody thought it was going to be a much bigger roundabout, which would have slowed the traffic coming into Dartington. In fact, all it is a very small one that you could just about stand on as one person, and that was designed, apparently, Richard Jackson told me this afterwards, so that the lorries could actually turn easier without having to slow down so much. And I think that's a really worrying concept. So I would ask that maybe part of this is that we condition further modifications to that roundabout to really have an impact on slowing down traffic as it passes through this area of Dartington. 30 miles an hour is more than enough. And I mean, I know that, I think, as I say, I would ideally like to see it at 20 miles an hour. And I think just to point out also that our own officers, SSR, the open space report actually says that this is too much, that we can't accommodate the green space, that this is overdevelopment of the site. So I actually put forward to you that this, I think collectively, this is overdevelopment of this site, as I believe that the Broome Park development is overdevelopment. And I think we should, again, I would ask initially for deferral, but I don't think I'm going to get that because nobody seconded it the last time. But I would actually move forward now into the debate and say that I would actually propose refusal because it's overdevelopment of the site. And I think the developers should come back with fewer housing, not be limited to up to 40. Maybe it should be maximum of 20, given the implications for flooding and for all the other things I've just talked about.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Apologies if it came across when I said just. I wasn't trying to belittle the just the ward member. I was just saying that it was just as the ward member, rather than as a committee member.
Well, I think it's really important that we take into consideration the sheer number of objections. There are hundreds of objections to all of these sites. And I think that needs to be really taken into consideration because we are making decisions today that affect all those people that live in that area and the people that would then come in as well.
No, thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Just before we go on, I see Councillor Kemp, you wanted to come in. Is Mr. Jackson still there? Mr. Jackson, I don't know if you'd like to comment on a possible zebra crossing and also the roundabout. Thank you,
Chair. I'm here still, thanks. Similar issues in respect of a zebra crossing exist as to my previous explanation relating to Broome Park for the bus stops. Really, there is unlikely to be anywhere near the demand for a formal crossing just from Broome Park to use the crossing. And there are, as Graham has pointed out previously, lots of alternative, safer routes that mean you wouldn't have to cross the A385 to get to the amenities within the village. And I certainly, for one, wouldn't choose to cross the main road if I could avoid it with my kids, So I have to say that the choice is being offered with the application. So I've got no reason to kind of rebut what's been said, really. So that's that point. In terms of the roundabout itself, there is an overrun area on the roundabout designed to accommodate right turning manoeuvres coming from the industrial areas either side of the A385, and that had to be accommodated because of the vehicle swept paths. As far as I'm aware, there is no recognised speeding issue or accident record for that roundabout, so there is no reason to suggest that it is inappropriate, really. That's the professional view of the Highway Authority.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson. I mean, whereas I had some sympathy with your explanation of the one from Broome Park, I think here, where you're talking about two, residential developments opposite each other, I would have thought there'd be a much greater degree of pedestrian crossing of that road. I'll
just touch on it again, but there are only 30 houses at Higher Tweed. So
38.
38 is it? Sorry. So even 38 would generate a very small number of pedestrians wishing to cross in that direction. There will be, obviously you've got the shop and you've got the school, which would probably be the most highest generators of pedestrian traffic that include vulnerable road users. So I would disagree, unfortunately, with that point that you have the rear much safer routes, and I would be minded to walk along those much more pleasant routes behind the hedges on the northern side of the A385, and then cross at the proposed zebra crossing, which is if you do want to get to the shop, which is going to be provided by Baker Estate. So I don't personally agree, unfortunately, and I do think that we may create a safety issue if we put in an underutilized zebra crossing. And as I said previously, that is what it says in the national guidelines. So I'm just following best practice.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. Councillor Kemp.
Oh yeah, sorry. Rich has just put me right off my stroke, because actually, I mean, what about social interaction between the two estates? Kids wanting to go play with other kids across the road, etc. You know, we've got the same problem here, where you guys say no, it's unsafe to have a zebra crossing. Yet we had a kid run over not long ago who, you know, could have lost his leg. And still, you won't change the restriction, you won't move the speed back, you won't give a zebra crossing. So we need to nail these things down at the outset, because after, you know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I take your point, Councillor Kemp. Can I? Yes, I understand your frustration, and obviously there was a horrendous accident up at a lot as well. But just what I'm saying is that, is it fair to, I mean, I appreciate what Mr. Jackson said about a zebra crossing. If retrospectively we decide that actually, yes, it would be better to put in a zebra crossing, is that a possible action that could take place, Mr. Jackson? Because I appreciate it's not part of it.
Could we get the access plan up again? I mean, I personally would not support it as the officer recommendation. On the sheer numbers that we're talking about using it, but obviously it's a member decision on that one. The problem with the zebra would be it's got to be far enough away from the proposed access, and at the same time cannot sterilise the ability to put in the bus stop. So there are a number of issues that could.
So there are some constraints. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Right, Councillor Hodgson, did you want to come back and make your point during the debate now?
Well, I just wanted to pick up while we're just talking about the zebra crossing, because I mean it's one thing to talk about how many we're just looking at in terms of a individual, but this is the whole thing about cumulative impacts. We should be designing these areas on the basis of all the plans that are coming forward, and that should all be set out well in advance. I mean, I know we've got all these various TTTV policies, but what we haven't got is a sense that when they're all built out, what will be needed. And a lot of people believe that we should be doing infrastructure first, not sort of following it up afterwards piecemeal with 106, which it essentially just means that a lot of the time developers don't actually have to develop what we really need. And then when ward members come forward in the way that, for example, Councillor Kemp has just said, there's incidents and accidents happening, and then we get told there's no money. Well, these developers should get funding this properly in advance, and we should be precautionary, not sort of waiting for the accident.
We've heard the arguments here. Members will make up their own minds as to that. Mr. Jackson has made his points and you've made yours, but I think we're going to move on from the zebra crossing. Right. Okay.
Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Kemp.
I just wanted to say, when we were back on the other slide, the boundary is still too close to the road. Can it not be moved back on the road at least?
Hello, Councillor Feist. If you turn off your camera, that would be good.
Apologies, Chairman. My PowerPoint presentation is just closed down on its own, so I don't have the presentation, but I shall try to reopen it as soon as possible.
Okay.
Well, you don't do it on my account. I just wanted to point out the fact that it's still too close to the road, which is
Okay.
It's a problem.
Okay, that's fine. That's right. Members, we're into the debate. Councillor, Mr. Jackson, did you want to say something else?
Yes, please, if I may. I appreciate we're not considering the reserve matters application at this stage, but I have heard several points about the houses not being too close to the road. But actually, within all of the national guidelines, it does actually recommend that you do put houses close to roads because it gives a sense of place and reduces vehicle speed. So if we are really concerned about people crossing roads, what we need to do is actually say to drivers that you're entering an urbanized area with obviously a sensitive design in relation to the ecology and the hedges at the same time, but there is a balance to be struck. Is
right.
my view on that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Councillor Rowe.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask if the gentleman whose face appeared full on my screen, who I believe is joining us from Salcombe, that it is nearly 2 o'clock. We've been going for 4 hours and we haven't had our lunch yet. So I think he may be in for a little long wait. Have we got to the open debate, or are we still on?
No, we're in the debate. We're in debate, Rose. You press on.
Oh, well, I'm not sure I want to speak just yet. I'll hear what other people have got to say first. OK, if there's someone in front of me or not. Is there anyone else wishing to speak at this point in time?
Not that I'm aware of.
Councillor Panel has his hand up and I've got mine up.
OK, right. Well,
OK. Councillor Panel. I'll go to Councillor Panel then. Has he got his hand up?
Yeah, I've asked to speak in the chat box.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Panel.
All right, thank you. I was going to raise a point about the properties bordering the road and the approach into Shinners Bridge, and I'm appalled to hear that we are now trying to create an urban atmosphere, to quote Mr. Jackson. When I thought the whole point was that we were trying to maintain some of the rural characteristics of this area. I can understand now why, when I drive into various settlements, that where the newest developments are on the edges of the towns and villages, that these buildings seem to crowd right onto the road. I was going to say I'm depressed every time I come into Shinners Bridge from Brent to see that those houses, the mass of those houses right on the roundabout there, next door to where we're talking about. And
Panel, can I just stop you there, because this is going to be a reserve matters decision, that where the
well, I just want to ask that I want to ask that, or can we not condition it, that I would like to see that the Devon Bank is retained as much as possible on that side. And to ask that our planning officer bears this in mind when he talks to the developers, because when it comes back to us, it will be too late, as we found out in Kingsbridge. I would ask that we give some thought to the mass of the buildings along the edge of the road, and that we do what we can to protect the Devon Bank. And I don't know what we can do to condition that second thing, but I would like to if it's possible.
Okay, I'll bring back Mr. Kitching on those two specific issues on the where the houses are and the Devon Bank, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to take you back to one of the very first slides I showed, which had the policy requirements for this one. Obviously, it is a reserved matter. But in terms of the allocation and the policy requirements to consider both this and the reserve matters applications, point D here, the requirement is the provision of a locally distinctive frontages on movement routes, especially the main A358. So that doesn't really confirm one way or another. It doesn't say it has to be a built form development right up to the highway edge, nor does it say the hedge bank needs to be retained. But there is a requirement to have a distinctive frontage, and I'm hearing what members are saying, and obviously the developers are on the call as well, on the meeting, so they're hearing that. I'm satisfied that it would be possible to get something which, at this stage, we know we could do something which would meet the reserve matters, and we do have that policy, making sure that whatever we do, it has to be a locally distinctive frontage and appropriate for that edge of the settlement, because point C requires like a softened edge of the development, the undeveloped countryside beyond. So I'm hearing what members are saying, and I think we can do that through the reserve matters because we have the policy backing to do so. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. It's helpful to hear that, and I know you said, Chairman, it wasn't part of what we're discussing at the moment, but I think it is important that we as members set down our views and our markers before these things are set in stone at the next stage. And it's good to know that we can have some, we can raise some points and have them listened to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Panel. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Things are playing up a bit today. Yeah, I won't spend ages because for obvious reasons we've been going too long. But I do think that we should actually be deferring this, but nobody's seconded that, so I'm actually going to propose removal. And my reasons for that are that we are not recognising and taking into consideration the cumulative impacts of these developments. As I said before, it's wrong to consider them separately. On this particular application, I think there is insufficient information. There's been last-minute reports submitted and the lack of detail, especially regarding the wildlife impacts and the lack of information about flooding. That, as I said, we know flooding happens in this area, and this is quite a raised site. It is above the shops at Dartington. It's above Week, a historic hamlet. And do we really want to start giving more problems to some of those ancient areas just so that we can squeeze more houses in? And also just the visual amenity of all the cumulative impact as well. We're really urbanising this whole area, and a bit of less density, which has been the traditional thing, would be far more acceptable, I think, to everybody. And certainly it would actually lessen the impact on every aspect of this, including, as I say, the historic heritage and the urbanisation, taking away that Devon Bank, the drainage, as we've already talked about. And I'm not happy about the fact that we're being offered, it's been suggested that we're just saying there is an option that we could actually end up putting pipes through through a separate site, which again, as I've said already, is not part of the allocated JLP sites. So we're already assuming that we're going to need to use something else. We can't just accommodate it all on site. So that has been, nobody's actually said it, but I think the implication is misleading. We cannot accommodate it all. We still need some way of getting those pipes off to the Wren stream. So that's going to be affected as well, and that again will affect that attenuation site, which we know is one of the 93% lost, potentially lost ancient meadows, as has been described by Mr. Day, who I have to say I welcome his report. The air quality and road safety is just going to get worse. We can't keep pretending it doesn't get worse. If you've got 40 new houses, you've potentially got 80 new cars in and out all the time, going off down to Morrison's through Totnes. So there's a lot more road traffic's going to happen, which is, not everybody's got an electric car at this stage, or using public transport. So I think that we've got good cause to refuse this and ask them to come back with a less dense plan. I think it's about density. I think it's overdevelopment of the site. And I ask somebody to second my proposal there. Thank you.
I'll second you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Rowe.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. I think we should be considering what is before us today, and we're considering an outline planning application and not all the bits and pieces that seem to go with it. I think we've been going off in different angles some of the time and talking about stuff which is not really very relevant to what we're considering today. This site accords with the JLP, it's in the JLP, and The comments are mainly that I'd like to make would be the same as I said in the previous application at Broome Park about Dartington. And it is a lot of development in Dartington, but we've had a lot of development here in Stoke Gabriel, and we're not served by any main roads. We've had 4 sites going at one time, and believe you me, we don't particularly like it either, but we have to live with it. And with the Inglewood application on Brixham Road having been approved by appeal, and the results came out yesterday with 300 odd houses. If you go along the Waterton Road, you'll see that those houses are pretty much going to join up with Stoke Gabriel before very long. So we've all got the same problems. People need houses, and people are living longer, and more people are living on their own, and we don't have families living together like we used to. So that's why we need all these houses. So whether we like it or not, we do have to have them. I don't really wish to say very much else, because it's in the JLP. We've been going for 4 hours, and we could very likely be going for a bit longer yet. And I, for one, would quite like to have my lunch, actually. So I'm going to move approval, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, Chairman. Yeah, click on everything. Yeah. Yes, we knew that this was these two applications were going to cause a lot of discussion there, and rightly so, because it is a lot of extra houses. But as Councillor Rowe has very well put it, everywhere's having a lot more houses. We're told we need these houses. A lot of youngsters who can't get a house in the area are moving out because they can't afford to live here, so on and so forth. I shan't say any more than that. Other than it's perhaps something that Officer Jackson can clear up. I believe I've heard that any village or town can now actually apply to get a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit within their boundary. I believe that's just recently come in. If it is the case, that would certainly alleviate some of the road safety issues. Perhaps you'd like to answer that question if he possibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. Yes, I believe you're right. You can apply, but you must meet similar criteria to what has always been the case, in that there must be justification for such applications, such as accident records or other amenities like primary schools and etc. In the vicinity. So it's not quite as clear cut as
okay,
what you might think.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Councillor Kemp brought up a very valid point when she said about children who want to play with their mates across the road in the other estate. There could be a lot more people walking forward and back across between the estates than actually is.
I suppose if we took that approach, we'd have crossings on every single road within Devon.
Yeah, but safety's first, isn't it? Anyway, we won't get into argument about that.
Safety first. Thank you.
Okay.
I will reluctantly, but I think looking at everything, I understand all the problems we're having and all the issues we're having, but I'm going to second Councillor Rowe's proposal for approval.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Foss. Sorry, I was muted. I've been rabbiting on.
I just thought I lost connection.
Yes, Councillor Holway.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I would have been more than happy to second approval. I think it's worth remembering that houses do need to be visible from routes into villages and towns, because it does help slow things down. I don't like the present policy of hiding them away, so that, if there are pedestrians, it's a bit of a surprise for people driving in there. They think they're in the countryside and they're not. I think with regard to the pedestrian crossing, there is a refuge island in the plan. And I think you have to be a bit careful what you wish for, because if you have a pedestrian crossing, then it means that more vehicles will be stopping and starting, and that will exacerbate the air quality in that area. So I do think you have to be very careful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holway. Councillor Kemp, did you want to say something, or should we go to the votes now?
There are other potential ways of slowing the traffic down before it even gets to the village.
Councillor Kemp, we're talking about a planning application here, not traffic calming. If you're not happy with it, you can vote against it. But I don't want to extend this debate into some sort of what's best for traffic calming in Devon. That's not what we're here for.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Right. Okay. Councillor Hodgson, do you just quickly?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand what the conditions are, because we've got an option on this.
Well, we're going to vote on your refusal. We're going to vote on your refusal first, so we might not like conditions.
Okay, so can you come back to me then if we end up not getting refusal?
Okay, so I'm going to go to refusal first. So, Miss Young, if we could vote for this is for refusal of the application, opposed to the officer recommendation. Miss Young.
Thank you, Chair. And can you confirm you've heard everything, please? Councillor Abbott.
I've heard the debate and I am against refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil.
I've heard the debate and I'm against refusal.
Councillor Brown.
I have heard the debate and I vote against refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Foss.
I've heard the debate and I'm against refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
I've heard the debate and I'm in favour of refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Holway.
I've heard the debate and I'm against refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
I've had the debate and I'm for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
I've heard the debate and I'm against refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Panel.
I've heard the debate and I abstain.
Councillor Pringle.
I've heard the debate and I'm against refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
I've heard the debate and I'm against refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I've heard the debate and I'm against refusal.
Thank you. Chair, that is 7 against, 2 for refusal and 1 abstaining.
Thank you. That application is the refusal of that application is turned down. We now have a proposal for a recommendation as per the officer's recommendation for approval of this application. Councillor Hodgson, you wanted to just talk about conditions on this.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to recognise the fact that we've been looking at this in terms of like what's going to be needed in terms of flooding attenuation and the option of using an unallocated site for an attenuation pond, which the design that we've looked at is absolutely huge. And I'm very mindful of the fact that there's some queries, very serious queries remarks, even with Sarah Jennings, about the potential impact on wildlife. And I think that we should put a condition on this, that the any flooding attenuation should be dealt with wholly within the site, or no more than just having the pipes, as was put out. But we shouldn't allow for this actually using another site for its attenuation, because that's not allocated, and it could impact quite considerably. So I think it's meaning that this site then will have to accommodate what it needs within the site.
Okay, I don't think we can prevent them from putting in an application. I mean, we can refuse that application when they put it in, but I don't think we're in a position to say, no, you can't put in an application for an attenuation site outside of this boundary. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think that's the position that we're in. It's going to come to reserve matters. They can't come up with a flood scheme or a how they're going to get the water off the site in an acceptable manner. That will be refused, and that will have to, and that is going to come to reserve matters. So I understand your concerns about it, and I also understand your concerns. So do Natural England, and indeed and Miss Jennings about the original attenuation site that they've got. So yeah, but I don't think we can ban them from putting in an application.
Okay, so the other thing I just wanted to point out was the regard to our own officers' OSSR report, that we ought to make some mention of that in the conditions to make sure that that is taken into consideration, and that we're aware of the implications of that, because they're saying that this is too much in that site. So I think, you know, because obviously this is application for up to 40 houses, it is not for 40 houses. So if we can just make sure that that OSSR report is part of the conditions that they have to meet.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Kitchen, did you want to comment on that?
Yes. So the my recommendation is with the section 106 that in terms of the open space, they have to provide a policy compliant area of accessible natural green space or open space based on a and if that's based on a development of 40 dwellings, that's a minimum of 1,719 square meters of open space. So yes, the 106 would fix the amount of open space, or make sure they provide the full policy compliant amount of open space on the site, which is more than what the open space officer was referring to when she was referring to the 300 meters in her response. So yes, I think we've got that fully covered.
Okay, and can I just ask a third thing as well, in terms of the 106 monies and what there's been sort of a shopping list of things that it could be spent on, just to remind us that at the last couple of weeks, executive and indeed as myself as a delegated ward member, there's money's gone from previous developments for some of those items. So I think it should just be much more open about meeting recreational and sport needs, rather than actually having a shopping list of things that could actually be found to have been covered by funding by the time that this application finally rolls out to its when the 106 monies would be paid out. Because, for example, various elements of the tennis courts, I think, will probably be done and dusted by then. So it's silly to have historic things listed in the 106.
Okay.
More general.
So is the 106 for recreation and open space, is that specifically tied to individual projects, or can it be just for anything that comes up within the Dartington area?
Yeah, I think so, because I mean, I'm to be honest.
No, well, I'm not asking you, Councillor Hodgson. I'm just I'm asking Councillor Kitching.
Oh, but he's not a councillor.
Thank you. No,
sorry, Mr. Kitchen.
So, yeah, so under the sports facilities heading of the heads of terms, the 106, that it's requiring the contribution of 34,110 capital and 39,822.12 maintenance costs towards sports facilities. We do need to provide a list of the of potential projects, because to meet the tests, we have to obviously be making sure that they're paying money, which is then improving sports facilities in that immediate area. So it meets the the SIL 122 tests. We have a list of 5 things there in terms of drainage improvements at the Dorothy Elmhurst football pitch and repair improvement at Meadowbrook.
Okay. Okay, we know that. I was just wondering if we could expand that.
Or other such projects as may be agreed by the owner and the council, but we would need to demonstrate how they are directly related to the development.
Okay, that's good. I mean, that's the kind of flexibility that we're looking for, I think. Mr. Wyman, did you want to say something there?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be very brief. All I was going to suggest is in line with the previous application, perhaps a way to deal with this would be to rather than just the delegated authority going through myself and yourself, perhaps it is then through the ward member as well, because this is a matter of detail in the section 116 that can be dealt with at that time.
No, I totally agree with that. I hope Councillor Rowe and Councillor Foss are happy with that as well. That's proposed.
Yes,
yeah, Councillor Foss.
Fine.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay, that's good. Right, in which case I will now move to the vote. This is for approval as per the officer recommendation, with the slight amendment that the local ward member is included in the discussion during the delegation. So over to you, Ms. Young.
Thank you, Chair. Again, can you confirm you've heard everything and let me know how you're voting for the application? Councillor Abbott.
I've heard the debate and I'm voting for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil.
I've heard the debate and I'm voting for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
I have heard the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Foss.
I've heard the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
I've heard the debate and I vote against approval.
Councillor Holway.
I've heard all the debate and I'm voting for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
I've had the debate and I'm voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
I've heard all of the debate and I'm voting for approval.
Councillor Panel.
I've heard the debate and I vote for approval.
Councillor Pringle.
I've heard the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
I've heard the debate and I'm voting for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I've heard all the debate and I'm voting for approval.
Thank you. Chair, that is 10 for approval and 2 against.
Thank you very much, members. That application is approved. It's been a long, very long morning. I'm going to declare this part of the meeting closed and we'll start again at 3 o'clock. Apologies to members of the public that may have joined us for 2 o'clock expecting, particularly I know there's been some in from Sulcombe, but I'm afraid we're going to have to let it till 3. Members have been going for over 4 hours. Yeah, over 4 hours now. So I think
4.5 hours nearly.
Nearly 4.5 hours. Thank you, Rose.
Yes.
So we're going to take a break till 3 o'clock and then we will come back and start again with application 6C. So thank you very much, members.
Thank you.
And Dan, yeah, apologies. Yeah, thank you for telling me in advance. And sorry we won't see you this afternoon. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Bye now.